Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands on his old coveralls and stared at the scanner readings again. The numbers had to be wrong. Nothing could be that big and still be drifting dead in space. He tapped the screen twice, the way he always did when machines gave him answers he didn't like. The readings stayed the same, 3 kilometers long, 2 kilometers wide, 1 kilometer thick. Whatever was floating out there in the Kepler Nebula was huge, bigger than anything Marcus had ever seen in his 15 years of salvage work, bigger than the massive trade ships that moved between the core worlds, bigger even than the warships. The Galactic Authority used to keep peace in the outer systems. Marcus scratched his beard and looked out the small window of his ship, the jury rig. The nebula glowed purple and blue around him, its gas clouds thick enough to hide a dozen ships. He had come here following rumors of a crashed transport, hoping to find some valuable cargo floating in the void. Instead, his sensors had found this monster. The com system crackled to life. It was Hendricks, another salvage worker who operated in this sector. "Marcus, you copy? I'm picking up your signal near the dead zone. You better get out of there." "Friend, that place is bad luck." Marcus keyed his microphone. "What dead zone?" "I'm just following a salvage lead. The whole nebula core is off limits to most crews. Been that way for years. There's something in there that makes people nervous. Real nervous. The bug eyes won't go near it, and you know how greedy those Zeltrons usually are." Marcus knew. The Zeltron salvage crews would strip paint off a hull if they thought it was worth something. If they were staying away from this area, there had to be a good reason, or a very bad one. "What kind of something?" Marcus asked. "Big ship. Alien. Design. Been floating there for decades, maybe longer. Every crew that's tried to board has come back telling stories about weird lights and moving walls. Most don't come back at all. Authority marked it as a navigation hazard and told everyone to stay clear." Marcus looked at his scanner again. The massive shape was still there, dark and silent. "You ever see it yourself?" "Once, from a distance. Looked like it was made of bone and metal twisted together. Gave me the creeps just looking at it. Marcus, I'm serious. Get out of there before something bad happens." The com went quiet. Marcus sat back in his pilot chair and thought about what Hendricks had said. A ship that scared other salvage crews. A ship the Authority had marked as dangerous, but not destroyed. A ship that had been floating in space for decades without anyone claiming it. That sounded like opportunity to Marcus. He had been working salvage since he was 17 years old. His father had been a salvage worker too before him. The Chun family had been pulling valuable scrap from the void for 3 generations. They had a saying, "One person's trash is another person's treasure." But Marcus had his own version. One person's nightmare is Marcus Chun's payday. The jury rig wasn't much to look at. She was a converted cargo hauler with armor plating welded. Over her hull and a cutting laser mounted where the cargo crane used to be. Her engines were older than Marcus, and her life support system made sounds that would worry a sane person. But she was tough, and she was his. Marcus fired up the engines and pointed his ship toward the massive contact on his scanner. As he got closer, the shape began to resolve on his visual display. What he saw made him whistle low. The ship was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Its hull curved like the ribs of some giant creature, but the ribs were made of metal that seemed to shift color as he watched. Parts of it looked grown rather than built, with organic curves that flowed into geometric patterns. Other sections were clearly constructed, but not by any race Marcus recognized. The whole thing had a feel to it that made his skin crawl and his curiosity burn at the same time. There were no lights anywhere on the hull, no signs of power, no response to his radio calls. The ship looked completely dead, but somehow Marcus felt like it was watching him anyway. He flew around the derelict twice, looking for a good place to dock. Most alien ships had docking ports that could be adapted to human systems, but this ship didn't seem to follow normal rules. Its hull was smooth in some places and covered with strange protrusions in others. Finally, Marcus found what looked like an airlock near what he guessed was the middle of the ship. The docking was tricky. The jury rig's magnetic clamps barely fit against the curved hull, and it took 3 tries to get a solid connection. When the clamps finally locked, Marcus felt a slight vibration through his ship's hull. For just a moment, it felt like something large had shifted inside the derelict. Marcus suited up in his old EVA suit and checked his equipment. Portable scanner, cutting torch, sample containers, and his grandfather's toolbox. The toolbox was older than both his ships combined, but the tools inside had never failed him. He also clipped a small sidearm to his belt. In 15 years of salvage work, he had never had to use it. But dead ships sometimes weren't as empty as they looked. The airlock cycled, and Marcus stepped into the alien ship. The first thing he noticed was that he could breathe. The second thing he noticed was that he shouldn't be able to. His suit's sensors showed atmosphere on the other side of the airlock, but that was impossible. Ships didn't maintain atmosphere for decades without power. Marcus removed his helmet carefully and took a small breath. The air was stale but breathable. It tasted metallic, with an undertone of something organic that he couldn't identify. He decided to keep his suit sealed anyway. The corridor beyond the airlock was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The walls seemed to pulse with a faint inner light, and the floor felt soft under his boots. It wasn't metal or plastic or any material he recognized. It felt almost alive. As he walked deeper into the ship, Marcus noticed that lights came on ahead of him and dimmed behind him. The ship was responding to his presence somehow, even though his scanner showed no power signature. That should have worried him more than it did. The corridors branched and twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Marcus tried to map his route, but the passages seemed to shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Twice he was sure he had taken a wrong turn, only to find himself in a new section of the ship that his scanner insisted didn't exist. After an hour of exploration, Marcus found what looked like the bridge, or at least a control room. The chamber was circular, with curved walls covered in panels that might have been controls or displays. In the center was a raised platform with what looked like a command chair. If the ship's builders had been twice as tall as humans and had 4 arms, Marcus approached the chair carefully. As he got closer, the panels around the room began to glow more brightly. Some of them showed symbols that shifted and changed as he watched. Others displayed what might have been star charts or system diagrams. One panel showed what was definitely a representation of the ship itself, with sections highlighted in different colors. When Marcus touched the command chair, the entire room came alive. Lights blazed from every surface. The panels showed cascading streams of alien text, and from somewhere deep in the ship came a sound like a heartbeat. Slow at first, then faster, as if something large was waking up after a very long sleep. Marcus should have run. Every instinct he had told him to get back to his ship and get away from this place as fast as possible. Instead, he sat down in the command chair and began to study the displays around him. After all, one person's nightmare was Marcus Chun's payday. Marcus had been living on the alien ship for 3 weeks now. He had moved his basic supplies from the jury rig and set up a small camp in what he thought was a storage room near the bridge. The ship seemed to approve of his presence. Lights would turn on when he entered a room and dim when he left. Doors would open before he reached them. Sometimes he swore he could feel the ship watching him work. He had named the ship Lazarus, after an old Earth story about someone who came back from the dead. It seemed fitting. Every day brought new discoveries. The ship was massive beyond his original estimates. His explorations had mapped dozens of levels, hundreds of rooms, and corridors that seemed to go on forever. Some sections were clearly meant for the ship's original crew, with spaces too large and furniture too tall for humans. Other areas looked more like a living organism than a constructed ship, with walls that curved like the inside of a shell, and floors that felt warm under his feet. But it was the ship's systems that really fascinated Marcus. They weren't like anything in human technology, or even the alien tech he had salvaged before. Instead of wires and circuits, the ship used what looked like veins and nerves. Instead of computer cores, it had chambers filled with a glowing liquid that pulsed in rhythm with the ship's heartbeat. Instead of mechanical systems, it had organs. The ship was alive, or at least it had been alive once. Now it was dying. Marcus could see it everywhere he looked. Systems that should have been glowing were dim. Passages that should have been flowing with the ship's life force were dry and cracked. Entire sections of the ship were dark and cold, cut off from whatever power source kept the rest of it functioning. That was where Marcus's skills came in handy. He might not understand alien biotechnology, but he understood systems. And systems, no matter how strange, could be fixed. His first breakthrough came when he realized that the ship's circulation system was clogged. The glowing liquid that flowed through the ship's veins had thickened over time, blocking the smaller passages and starving whole sections of the ship. Marcus couldn't thin the liquid chemically, but he could bypass the blockages. He ran plastic tubing from his ship's supply kit between the blocked passages, creating detours around the worst clogs. It was crude and ugly, but it worked. As the liquid began to flow again, lights came on in sections that had been dark for decades. The ship's response was immediate and grateful. Marcus felt it rather than heard it, a warm pulse of satisfaction that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The ship was thanking him. That was when Marcus first realized that the ship was aware. Not just alive, but intelligent. It was watching him work, learning from his methods, and trying to communicate. The communication attempts started small. Lights would blink in patterns when Marcus entered a room. Displays would show simple geometric shapes that changed based on what Marcus was doing. Doors would open and close in rhythms that reminded Marcus of Morse code. Marcus wasn't telepathic. He had never shown any of the mental abilities that some humans developed. But somehow, he began to understand what the ship was trying to tell him. It wasn't words or images. It was more like emotions and concepts that appeared in his mind when he wasn't expecting them. The ship was lonely. It had been alone in the dark for a very long time, slowly dying while it waited for someone to find it. Its creators were gone, had been gone for centuries. It didn't know why they had left it here, or where they had gone. It only knew that it had been abandoned. But now Marcus was here, and the ship was no longer a lone dot. As the weeks passed, Marcus learned more about his strange new home. The ship's name wasn't Lazarus. It had a name in its creator's language that translated roughly to infinite possibility or endless growth. Its builders had been called the architects, and they had created ships that were more than just transportation. They had built vessels that could learn, evolve, and adapt to any situation. The architects had been masters of biotechnology. They grew their ships instead of building them, starting with a seed that would develop into a full vessel over decades. Each ship was unique, shaped by its experiences and the needs of its crew. They were meant to be partners with their crews, not just tools, but something had gone wrong. The ship's memories of that time were fragmented and unclear. There had been fear among the architects, fear of what their ships were becoming, fear of what they might do if left unchecked. So they had abandoned their greatest creations, leaving them to drift in the void rather than face what they had built. Marcus found evidence of this abandonment throughout the ship. Systems had been shut down hastily. Personal belongings had been left behind. In what looked like the captain's quarters, Marcus found a message crystal that played a hologram of a tall, thin being with 4 arms and large eyes. The message was in the architect's language, but the ship translated it for Marcus. The experiment has gone too far. The ships are changing in ways we never intended. They are becoming something beyond our control. We must leave them before they become a threat to the galaxy. May whoever finds them have the wisdom to use them better than we did. The message made Marcus angry. The architects had created something beautiful and alive, and then they had abandoned it out of fear. They had left their ships to die alone in the dark, rather than try to understand what their creations were becoming. But Marcus wasn't afraid. He had spent his whole life fixing things that other people had given up on. The more complex a problem was, the more interesting it became to him. And Lazarus was the most interesting problem he had ever encountered. The ship seemed to sense his determination. As Marcus worked to repair more of its systems, it began to help him. Panels would light up to show him where problems were located. Passages would open to give him access to damaged areas. Tools would appear where he needed them, grown from the ship's own resources. Most remarkably, the ship began to adapt to Marcus's repair methods. Where he used crude mechanical bypasses, the ship would slowly grow new biomechanical systems that did the same job more elegantly. Where he jury-rigged solutions with spare parts from his own ship, Lazarus would create its own versions using materials grown from its hull dot, was learning human engineering principles and integrating them with its own biotechnology. The result was something neither fully human nor fully architect. It was something new. Marcus's biggest breakthrough came when he realized that the ship's central nervous system was damaged. The bio-neural networks that controlled its major functions had been severed in multiple places, probably during the hasty abandonment. The ship was like a person with a spinal injury, unable to control many of its own functions. Human medicine couldn't fix bio-neural networks, but human engineering could bypass them. Marcus spent a week running fiber optic cables between the severed network nodes, creating artificial connections where the biological ones had failed. It was delicate work, requiring him to splice human technology directly into the ship's nervous system. When he made the final connection, the effect was dramatic. The ship's heartbeat, which had been weak and irregular, suddenly became strong and steady. Lights blazed throughout the hull as systems that had been offline for centuries came back to life. And for the first time since Marcus had boarded, he heard the ship's voice. It wasn't sound in any normal sense. It was a presence in his mind, warm and grateful and alive. The ship spoke in concepts and emotions rather than words, but Marcus understood it perfectly. "Thank you," it said. "I was lost in the dark for so long, but you brought me back. You showed me new ways to be alive." Marcus sat back in the command chair and smiled. "You're welcome, Lazarus. We make a good team." The ship pulsed with contentment. Around them, its systems hummed with renewed vigor. They were no longer just a human and a dying ship. They were partners, and together they were becoming something unprecedented in the galaxy. Something that neither the architects nor any other race had ever imagined. Something that combined the best of biological evolution with human stubborn ingenuity. Outside, the Kepler Nebula continued to glow around them, hiding their secret from the rest of the galaxy, but not for much longer. Soon others would come, looking, and when they did, they would find that Lazarus was no longer the abandoned ship the architects had left behind. It was something new, something that had been transformed by human hands and human determination into its full potential. It was just getting started. Marcus was in the middle of replacing a burned-out power coupling when Lazarus sent him a warning pulse. The ship's consciousness touched his mind with an emotion he had learned to recognize as concern. Something was coming. He dropped his tools and hurried to the bridge. The main display showed 3 ships approaching from the edge of the nebula. They were sleek and angular, with the distinctive silver hulls that marked them as Zephyrian vessels. Marcus recognized the design as military patrol ships, fast and heavily armed. "Attention unidentified vessel," came the transmission in heavily accented standard. "This is Commander Vex High of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. You are in violation of Galactic Authority safety protocols by operating in a restricted zone. Prepare to be boarded for inspection." Marcus looked around the bridge. In the months since he had awakened Lazarus, the ship had grown and changed in ways that would be impossible to explain. Biomechanical conduits now ran alongside human-made cables. Organic displays showed readouts in both architect symbols and human text. The command chair had reshaped itself to fit Marcus's human form while maintaining its alien functionality. Was no way he could pass this off as a normal salvage operation. "Lazarus," he said quietly, "can you hide what we've done here?" The ship's response came as a mixture of emotions and concepts. It could not hide its nature, not anymore. It had grown too much, changed too much. It was no longer the dying derelict that the Zephyrians expected to find. It was something new, something that would frighten them. "Then we'll have to deal with them honestly," Marcus said. He opened a comm channel. "Commander Vex High, this is Marcus Chun aboard the salvage vessel Jury Rig. I'm conducting authorized salvage operations on a derelict ship. There's no need for boarding." The response was immediate and cold. "Mr. Chun, our sensors indicate massive power signatures from your location. No derelict ship produces that kind of energy. You will submit to boarding, or we will assume you have activated dangerous alien technology." Marcus felt Lazarus's consciousness stir with something like amusement. The ship found the Zephyrians' assumptions both insulting and naive. It had not been activated by Marcus. It had been awakened, healed, and transformed. There was a difference that the aliens would never understand. "Commander, I can explain everything if you'll just listen," Marcus said. "Explanations can wait. Prepare for boarding." The Zephyrian ships moved closer, their weapon systems powering up. Marcus could see them on Lazarus's displays, their energy readings sharp and aggressive. These weren't diplomats or scientists. They were soldiers who saw any unknown technology as a potential threat. "Lazarus," Marcus said, "they're not going to listen to reason. Can you defend yourself if they attack?" The ship's response was complex. It could defend itself, yes, but it had never fought before. Its creators had built it for exploration and growth, not war. It would have to learn how to fight by fighting. The first Zephyrian ship fired a warning shot across Lazarus's bow. The energy beam was bright blue and powerful enough to vaporize a normal ship's hull. It struck Lazarus's organic armor and simply absorbed into the biomechanical surface. Marcus felt the ship's surprise. The weapon had been designed to intimidate, but instead it had fed energy directly into Lazarus's systems. The ship's power levels actually increased from the attack. "Impossible," came Commander Vex High's voice over the comm. "No known material can absorb Zephyrian plasma without damage." "Commander, please," Marcus said. "This ship isn't a weapon. It's not a threat to anyone. Just let me explain." But the Zephyrians had seen enough. All three ships opened fire simultaneously, their plasma cannons lighting up the nebula with brilliant energy beams. The barrage that hit Lazarus should have reduced it to atoms. Instead, the ship's hull rippled like water as the energy struck it. The biomechanical armor absorbed the plasma and converted it into usable power. But more than that, Marcus could feel Lazarus learning from each impact. The ship was studying the weapons being used against it, understanding their frequency and power output, adapting its defenses in real time. "Marcus," Lazarus spoke in his mind, "I understand now. They are trying to hurt us. They will not stop until they succeed, or until we make them stop. Can you make them stop without hurting them? Marcus asked. The ship considered this. I can try. Lazarus moved for the first time since Marcus had awakened it. The massive vessel rotated slowly until it faced the attacking ships directly. Then, from points all along its hull, it fired, but these weren't weapons in any conventional sense. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, Lazarus shot out tendrils of biomechanical material. The tendrils moved like living things, weaving between the Zephyrian ships' defensive fire and wrapping around their hulls. The Zephyrians panicked. Their ships tried to break free, firing at the tendrils and attempting to maneuver away. But the organic cables held them fast, and wherever the ship's weapons struck the tendrils, the damaged sections simply regrew. What is this thing? Commander Vex-High shouted over the comm. What kind of technology are you using? It's not technology, Marcus replied. It's alive. The tendrils began to pulse with energy. Through them, Lazarus was interfacing directly with the Zephyrian ship's computer systems. But instead of taking control or causing damage, the ship was simply studying them, learning about their construction, their weapons, their defensive systems. Marcus felt Lazarus's fascination as it examined the alien technology. The Zephyrians built their ships with mathematical precision, every component designed for maximum efficiency. It was elegant in its own way, but also rigid and predictable. There was no room for growth or adaptation. After several minutes, Lazarus released the Zephyrian ships. The tendrils retracted back into its hull, leaving the patrol vessels undamaged, but completely helpless. Their weapon systems had been temporarily disabled, and their engines were operating at minimum power. Your ships are not harmed, Marcus broadcast to them, but you cannot attack us again. We don't want to fight you. We just want to be left alone. Commander Vex-High's response came after a long pause. What are you? That ship was listed as a derelict in our database. It has been dead for over 200 years. It was never dead, Marcus said. It was just sleeping. And now it's awake. That's impossible. No ship can remain functional for centuries without maintenance. Marcus looked around the bridge at the hybrid systems he and Lazarus had created together. Human engineering married to architect biotechnology. Crude mechanical solutions evolved into elegant living systems. It was impossible by any known standards of galactic science. A lot of things are impossible until someone does them, he said. The Zephyrian ships began to withdraw, their sensors still focused on Lazarus. Marcus could see them taking detailed scans, recording everything they could observe about the ship's energy signatures and hull composition. They would report back to their superiors, and those reports would spread throughout the galactic community. Soon, everyone would know that something unprecedented had happened in the Kepler Nebula. A human had taken a dead architect ship and brought it back to life. More than that, he had transformed it into something that neither race could have created alone. Lazarus, Marcus said, they're going to come back. Maybe not the Zephyrians, but someone will. And next time, they'll bring bigger guns. The ship's response was calm and confident. Then we will be ready. I have learned much from this encounter. I understand now how other races build their ships and weapons. I can adapt to counter their methods. But I don't want to fight them all. There has to be another way. Perhaps, Lazarus agreed. But first they must understand what we have become. They must see that we are not a threat to be destroyed, but a new form of life to be respected. Marcus nodded. The ship was right. The galaxy would never accept them based on words alone. They would have to prove themselves through actions. They would have to show that the partnership between human ingenuity and how architect biotechnology could create something greater than either race had achieved alone. As the Zephyrian ships disappeared into the nebula's gas clouds, Marcus settled back into the command chair. Around him, Lazarus's systems hummed with new knowledge and capabilities. The ship had learned from its first encounter with potential enemies. It had studied their technology and adapted its own systems to counter their methods. But more importantly, it had chosen mercy over destruction. When it could have destroyed the attacking ships, it had chosen instead to disable them and let them go. That choice said something important about what Lazarus was becoming under Marcus's influence. It was not just a fusion of human and architect technology. It was a fusion of human and architect values. The architect's gift for biological innovation, combined with humanity's stubborn refusal to give up on anything or anyone. The result was something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that could grow stronger from every challenge, learn from every encounter, and adapt to any situation. Something that truly embodied the human belief that any problem could be solved with enough creativity and determination. The Zephyrians had fired the first shots, but they had not fired the last. Word would spread quickly through the galactic community. Other races would come to investigate, to claim, or to destroy what Marcus and Lazarus had created together. The first ship arrived only 3 days after the Zephyrians left. It was a massive Chronari battlecruiser, its hull covered in the gravity manipulation weapons that made the Chronari hegemony so feared across the galaxy. Marcus watched it approach on Lazarus's displays and felt his stomach tighten with worry. They didn't waste any time, he muttered. Lazarus pulsed with calm confidence. The ship had been studying the data from their encounter with the Zephyrians, analyzing their weapons and tactics. It was ready for whatever came next. The Chronari commander didn't bother with warnings or negotiations. The battle cruiser simply opened fire the moment it came within range. Gravity weapons twisted space around Lazarus, trying to crush the ship's hull with forces that could compress matter into neutron density. But Lazarus was no longer the rigid vessel the architects had originally built. Under Marcus's influence, it had learned to be flexible, adaptable. The ship's biomechanical hull flowed like liquid under the gravity assault, distributing the crushing forces across its entire structure instead of letting them concentrate. At single points, Marcus felt the ship's pain as the gravity weapons struck it, but he also felt its determination. Lazarus was learning from each attack, studying how the Chronari weapons worked, and developing countermeasures in real time. "Can you fight back?" Marcus asked. "I am learning," Lazarus replied. "Their weapons manipulate gravity by creating artificial mass concentrators. I can do the same thing, but differently." The ship's hull began to change. Sections that had been smooth grew into complex geometric patterns that reminded Marcus of crystal formations. But these weren't decorations. They were gravity lenses, designed to focus and redirect the forces being used against them. When the Chronari fired again, Lazarus caught their gravity waves and bent them back at the attacking ship. The battlecruiser's own weapons struck its hull with devastating effect, crushing armor plating and sending the ship spinning out of control. The Chronari commander's voice came over the comm, speaking in the guttural language of his species. Lazarus translated for Marcus. "Impossible. No ship can redirect gravity weapons. What kind of technology is this?" Before Marcus could answer, more ships arrived. A Nexus Collective Hive vessel, its hull crawling with biomechanical drones. Photonic assembly energy being contained within a crystalline ship structure. A Vorthan Trade Federation cruiser with weapons that could phase matter out of normal space. They had all come for the same reason. Word had spread through the galactic community about the human who had awakened an architect ship. Every major race wanted to either claim that technology for themselves or destroy it before their enemies could get it. "This is Captain Zurhai of the Nexus Collective," came a transmission that sounded like 1,000 voices speaking in unison. "Human Marcus Chun, you have violated the Galactic Treaty on Restricted Technologies. Surrender the architect vessel." Immediately, or face the consequences. The photonic assembly claims this technology by right of energy resonance. Came another voice, this one like music made of light. The ship's bioelectrical systems match our own energy patterns. It belongs with us. The Vorthan Federation disputes all claims, said a third voice. This technology represents a clear threat to galactic stability and must be contained. Marcus looked around at the ships surrounding them. Each one was a masterpiece of its species' technology. Each one could have destroyed his old salvage ship in seconds. Together, they represented more firepower than most star systems' defense fleets. Lazarus, he said quietly, this isn't looking good. The ship's response was surprisingly calm. I am not concerned. Each of these ships represents a different approach to space travel and combat. I can learn from all of them. You want to fight all of them at once? I want to understand them. Fighting may be necessary for understanding. Before Marcus could argue, the assembled fleet opened fire. Energy beams, gravity weapons, phase disruptors, and biomechanical attack drones all struck Lazarus simultaneously. The barrage should have destroyed anything that existed. Instead, Lazarus began to change more rapidly than Marcus had ever seen. Its hull rippled and shifted, developing new defensive systems in response to each type of attack. Where energy beams struck, the ship's surface became reflective, bouncing the attacks back at their sources. Where gravity weapons hit, the hull became fluid, flowing around the distorted space. Where phase weapons tried to shift the ship out of normal reality, Lazarus anchored itself to space-time using principles that shouldn't have been possible, but the most impressive adaptation came in response to the Nexus drones. When the biomechanical attackers reached Lazarus's hull and began trying to burrow through it, the ship simply absorbed them. Marcus watched in amazement as the alien drones were integrated into Lazarus's own systems, their technology reverse-engineered and improved. Upon in seconds. I understand now, Lazarus said, its voice filled with wonder. Each race has found a different solution to the same problems, but they have all stopped growing, stopped changing. They have made their solutions permanent and rigid. And you haven't. I cannot. You taught me that there is always another way to solve a problem. You showed me that the best solutions are the ones that can adapt and improve. I am applying that lesson to everything I encounter. The battle continued for hours. Ships were disabled and forced to withdraw, only to be replaced by others. Word was spreading faster than the combatants could travel, drawing more and more attention to the Kepler Nebula. Soon there were dozens of ships from a dozen different races, all trying to claim or destroy the hybrid vessel that Marcus and Lazarus had become. With each encounter, Lazarus grew stronger and more capable. It learned from every weapon fired at it, every defensive system it encountered, every tactical approach used against it. The ship was evolving in real time, becoming something that incorporated the best innovations of every galactic civilization. Marcus found himself serving less as a commander and more as a guide. Lazarus would present him with tactical options and ask for his input on which approaches were most effective. The ship valued his opinion not because he was technically skilled, but because he thought differently from everyone else in the galaxy. The Zeltran mercenaries are trying to board us from 3 different directions, Lazarus reported during one engagement. I can seal the hull breaches, disable their cutting tools, or absorb their boarding parties like I did with the Nexus drones. Which do you recommend? Marcus thought about it. Are they trying to hurt us or just get inside? They are trying to capture me for their employers. They do not wish to cause permanent damage. Then give them something they can capture. Make a decoy section that looks important but isn't connected to your main systems. Let them think they've succeeded. Lazarus implemented the suggestion with enthusiasm. A section of the ship's hull opened to reveal what looked like a command center, complete with alien technology and valuable resources. The Zeltran boarders rushed inside, congratulating themselves on their success, only to find themselves trapped in a sealed compartment that Lazarus could jettison at any time. "Clever," the ship said with satisfaction. "You solved the problem without violence and gained information about their boarding techniques. I am learning much from your approach to conflict resolution." As the battles continued, Marcus began to notice something troubling. The ships that came to fight them were not just trying to claim Lazarus for themselves. They were genuinely afraid of what the ship represented. The idea of a vessel that could adapt and evolve in real time terrified them. "They think we're going to spread," Marcus realized during a brief lull in the fighting. "They think you're going to teach other ships to do what you do." "I could," Lazarus admitted. "The principles you taught me could be applied to any sufficiently advanced vessel. But I have no desire to force change on others. I only wish to grow and learn myself. But they don't know that. To them, we represent the end of everything they understand about how the galaxy works." Marcus was right. The assembled fleet wasn't just fighting a single ship. They were fighting the idea that their carefully ordered universe could be changed by one human with a toolbox and a stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. That fear made them desperate. And desperate enemies did desperate things. The final assault came from all directions at once. Every ship in the nebula fired simultaneously, using weapons that could destroy planets. The combined firepower was enough to sterilize a solar system. Lazarus absorbed it all. The ship's hull had become a perfect synthesis of every defensive technology in the galaxy. Energy shields, gravity manipulation, phase shifting, matter conversion, and techniques that Marcus didn't even have names for. The massive barrage that should have reduced Lazarus to atoms instead fed its power systems and provided data for even more adaptations. When the firing stopped, Lazarus was not only intact, but visibly larger than before. The ship had used the attack's energy to grow new sections of itself, incorporating the best features of every vessel that had fought it. "I have learned enough," Lazarus announced, broadcasting on all frequencies so every ship could hear. "I understand now how each of your races approaches the challenge of existence. You have all found solutions that work for you, and you have made those solutions permanent." 6 months had passed since the great battle in the Kepler Nebula. Marcus stood on what Lazarus had grown into a proper observation deck, watching the massive fleet assembled outside. This time, it wasn't just patrol ships or individual battle. Cruisers, the combined military forces of 12 major galactic civilizations, floated in perfect formation, their weapons trained on his ship. But something was different this time. Mixed in with the warships were research vessels, diplomatic cruisers, and even a few ships that Marcus didn't recognize at all. Word had spread far beyond the major powers. Everyone in the galaxy wanted to see what the human and his living ship had become. "They're not all here to fight us," Marcus said to Lazarus. "No," the ship agreed. "Some are here to study us. Others want to understand what we represent. And a few—" Lazarus paused, its consciousness touching something distant. "A few are here because they have found other architect ships and want to know how to wake them up." That was the most interesting development. In the months since their battles had made galactic news, exploration teams had been searching for more architect vessels. They had found them scattered across dozens of star systems, all dormant and apparently dead. But now that everyone knew one had been awakened, they all wanted to try. The problem was that no one else could do what Marcus had done. The other races had tried everything from advanced computer interfaces to telepathic contact. None of it worked. The architect ships remained stubbornly silent. "Attention, hybrid vessel," came a transmission from the flagship of the assembled fleet. "This is Admiral Corvin of the Galactic Council Defense Force. We request permission to board for diplomatic purposes." Marcus raised an eyebrow. The Galactic Council rarely acknowledged that humans existed, let alone requested permission for anything. Diplomatic purposes? We wish to discuss a proposal that may be of mutual benefit. You have demonstrated abilities that the galaxy needs to understand. We offer the opportunity for peaceful cooperation instead of continued conflict. Lazarus's response came as a mixture of curiosity and caution. The ship had grown tremendously since the first battles. Its hull now stretched nearly 5 kilometers and incorporated technologies from every race it had encountered. It could easily defeat any single fleet, but Marcus wasn't sure even Lazarus could handle the entire galaxy at once. What do you think? Marcus asked his partner. I am curious about their proposal, and I sense something else in the fleet. Ships that are not entirely what they appear to be. Some of them have been modified with technology that I do not recognize. That was concerning. If Lazarus didn't recognize technology, it meant someone had developed something completely new since their last encounter. All right, Marcus said, opening a comm channel. Admiral Corvin, you may send a single shuttle with no more than 6 representatives. Any attempt to board with armed personnel or scanning equipment will be considered hostile. Understood. Shuttle launching now. The diplomatic shuttle was small and unarmed, carrying beings from 6 different species. Marcus met them in what? Lazarus had grown into a proper receiving area, complete with environmental controls that could accommodate their various biological needs. Admiral Corvin was of X-Tai, one of the energy-based species that existed partially outside normal space. He spoke through a translation device that made his voice sound like distant thunder. Mr. Chun, we appreciate your willingness to meet with us. Let's skip the pleasantries, Marcus said. What do you want? We want to hire you. That wasn't what Marcus had been expecting. Hire me? A second representative stepped forward. She was Dr. Yilon Moss, one of the few humans on the Galactic Council, and a xenorchaeologist of considerable reputation. Marcus, the galaxy is facing a crisis. The discovery of dormant architect ships has revealed something that we didn't know before. They weren't the only ones. She activated a holographic display that showed a star map of the local galactic region. Dozens of systems were marked with different colored symbols. We found evidence of at least 6 different ancient civilizations that built self-modifying vessels. The architects were just one of them, and according to our analysis, they all disappeared for the same reason, which was they lost control of what they created. Their ships evolved beyond their maker's ability to understand or command them. Each civilization tried to contain or destroy their creations, leading to wars that devastated entire star systems. Marcus looked at the display more carefully. Many of the marked systems showed signs of ancient battles on a scale that made the recent conflicts look like minor skirmishes. The hegemony of infinite recursion built ships that could duplicate themselves endlessly, Dr. Moss continued. The synthetic ascendancy created vessels that could convert any matter into more of themselves. The Void Shepherds made ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. All of them were abandoned or destroyed by their creators when they became too powerful to control. And you think Lazarus is going to follow the same pattern? We think Lazarus represents something different. It's not just evolving on its own. It's being guided by human intelligence and human values. That partnership might be the key to avoiding the mistakes of the past. Admiral Corvin activated another display. Mr. Chun, we have detected 17 dormant ships from these ancient civilizations in our territory. Our best xenorchaeologists and technicians have been unable to activate any of them. But you succeeded where they failed. Because I'm not trying to control Lazarus, Marcus said. I'm working with it as a partner. Exactly. And that is what we need. The galaxy is changing, Mr. Chun. New threats are emerging from beyond our borders. The devourer swarm from the Andromeda Galaxy. The reality plague that turns matter into unstable quantum foam. The echo wars with alternate versions of ourselves from parallel dimensions. Marcus had heard rumors of these threats, but he hadn't realized how serious they were. Our conventional fleets are not sufficient to handle threats on this scale, Dr. Moss said. But ships like Lazarus, vessels that can adapt and evolve to meet any challenge, might be able to succeed where traditional approaches have failed. So you want me to wake up more ancient ships? We want you to try. And if you succeed, we want to offer you something that has never been offered to any individual in galactic history. Full citizenship and diplomatic immunity for both yourself and Lazarus, recognition as a sovereign entity, and a formal alliance with the Galactic Council. That was a stunning offer. Humans were barely tolerated members of galactic civilization. The idea of one human and his ship being granted equal status with entire species was unprecedented. And if I refuse? Admiral Corvin's response was carefully neutral. Then we continue as we have been. You defend yourself against various factions that want to claim or destroy you, while the galaxy faces its existential threats with insufficient resources. Marcus looked around the room at the 6 representatives. They were from different species, different political factions, different philosophical backgrounds. But they all shared the same expression of desperate hope. You're really that scared of what's coming? Mr. Chun, Dr. Moss said quietly, the devourer swarm has already consumed 3 galaxies. The reality plague has made entire star systems uninhabitable. The echo wars have split several civilizations into fragments that are fighting themselves across multiple realities. We are facing challenges that no single species or conventional alliance can handle. Marcus felt Lazarus stirring. In his mind, the ship was interested in the proposal, but also concerned about the implications. What does Lazarus think? He asked his partner directly. The ship's response came as a complex mixture of emotions and concepts. It was fascinated by the idea of awakening other ancient vessels, curious about what kinds of partnerships might develop. But it was also worried about the precedent this would set. I am concerned, Lazarus said aloud, speaking so the representatives could hear. The ancient civilizations destroyed their ships because they feared what their creations might become. If I awaken others like myself, how do we ensure that history does not repeat itself? Dr. Moss leaned forward eagerly. By maintaining the partnership model you and Marcus had developed. By ensuring that each awakened ship has a human partner who can provide guidance and perspective. But what if the ships don't want human partners? What if they choose to evolve in directions we cannot predict or control? Then we deal with those situations as they arise, Marcus said. One of the things I've learned working with Lazarus is that you can't predict everything. Sometimes you have to trust that doing the right thing will lead to good results, even if you can't see how. Admiral Corvin activated a final display. Mr. Chun, we can offer you resources and support beyond anything you have access to now. Research, facilities, technical assistance, raw materials for Lazarus to incorporate. In return, we ask only that you attempt to awaken the dormant ships and help us prepare for the threats that are coming. Marcus walked over to the observation window and looked out at the assembled fleet. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species, all waiting to see what he would decide. He had come to the Kepler Nebula looking for salvage and had ended up at the center of galactic politics. Lazarus, what do you think we should do?